I'm here with David Malone, Associate Professor, Buswell Memorial Library at Wheaton College. Thank you, David, for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
As you know, Frederick Buechner will soon be turning 90 years old. Is there anything you would like to wish him for this great milestone?
Yeah, I would say, I wish Fred many more years, certainly. But at the end of his journey, certainly that he would hear the words of "well done."
Well, thanks very much, David. I'm sure that Mr. Buechner will greatly appreciate hearing from you. Next, can you tell me how you first learned about his work?
So I can remember the first time that I heard of Frederick Buechner's name. It was around 1988 at a musical concert being performed by Michael Card. And I remember him talking about Frederick Buechner and the influence of Buechner's writings on his own life and his own musical career. And so several years later, I can remember that recollection and then trying to track down these writings of Frederick Buechner and coming against that disconnect sometimes of Buechner as a name and how Buechner is spelled in library catalogs, for instance.
What would you say most attracts you to Mr. Buechner's writing?
I think Fred's writings they're comfortable, they're accessible, they also express a vulnerability, as well as I think other words that just come to mind are compassionate, encouraging.
That's great. For those of the people listening that may not know, you have been the keeper of Mr. Buechner's archives for a number of years.
Right.
In addition to that, how would you say that Mr. Buechner's writing has influenced your career?
I would say, coming historically in my background, coming from more a conservative Protestant Christian environment, I've always appreciated that uncertainty is okay. So one of the things that some Christians can struggle with, for instance, is doubt. Well, each Christian often will struggle with doubt, but how one engages doubt, and one of Fred's most famous quotes is that doubt is the ants in the pants of faith. So I've appreciated his engagement with uncertainty, that it is not something necessarily to be feared, but to be engaged or embraced as a process to reaching something more full.
So I think you probably read quite a few of Mr. Buechner's books. Which of those would you say have meant the most to you?
I've really appreciated two works in particular. I'm thinking of Wishful Thinking, the theological ABC, which is really takes a different look at some standard terms that often get bantied about within religious circles, Christian circles. For instance, that's where the definition doubt comes in, or vocation, of where one's passion meets the world's most deepest needs. Definitions like that. He provides a different perspective, a different twist on things that I have appreciated that perspective. And another work I would say is Telling Secrets, where again I'd mentioned the word vulnerability maybe before, that he really he puts his life on display, where whatever in some ways tragedies or the difficult situations, he puts it out there and is fairly self-revealing, which I think, well, it's more beyond think, I know has been an encouragement to other individuals, has been something that has helped bring comfort, confidence to folks. So those are two very different works. I've unfortunately not had real opportunity to engage a lot of the fiction writing, because I'm drawn more to nonfiction works, and those are two of his that I've appreciated.
Thanks, David. How would you say that Mr. Buechner has inspired any of your own work?
I would say one thing that Fred has inspired me to be is more of a storyteller. So in my role as overseeing archives and special collections kinds of materials, one of the things that we've started here that I think Fred has influenced is starting a blog that tells the stories of various archives or special collections. So rather than simply being a communicator of facts, so telling secrets communicates, for instance, a lot of facts, but he's much more telling a story, and that story is much broader and more significant than merely the facts itself. Because simply telling facts can remove much of the forcefulness of the story that should be told.
I think that's a great way to think of it. Thank you.
Sure.
More broadly speaking, what influence would you say that Mr. Buechner has had on Christianity and the world at large?
So I mentioned that maybe conservative Christian Protestant perspective that is often found within evangelicalism. I think he's spoken words of encouragement and comfort, as I mentioned before, to a lot of individuals in those traditions that have welcomed maybe an environment that's more open to ambiguity, that doesn't need to create either a sense or the reality of some certainties that on this side of the veil may not be as well known or as certain as we would hope or want, but that he again makes folks comfortable and encouraged by that. And he's also helped them to understand that God is present and that God is at work.
I realize this next question is difficult, but if you were to sum up Fred in a few words, what would you say?
I would use I'd use terms like faithful pilgrim. That Fred is clearly, from his writings, a man on a journey, someone who is moving from point A to point B. He's not simply resting idle. He's engaging the ideas and the circumstances of life. So despite what may come his way, that he's continuing to look for God, but also to God, and to point others to where he has found God.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we finish?
Happy birthday.
All right, thanks again. David Malone from Wheaton College. Thank you.